couldn't help but notice your pain.
My pain?
It runs deep. Share it with me.
Above the Rim, 1994, starring Dwayne Martin, Leon, Marlon Wayans, and Tupac Shakur. Welcome back to Streetball Strategies basketball movie reviews. So right up front, let me say this is going to be the longest review I probably ever do on this channel. The reason for that is because I'm not objective about this movie at all. The reason for that is because it's one of those movies that it was the exact right movie that came out at the exact right time in my life. It came out in '94. I probably didn't see it until about '98. At that time, I was at the very beginning of my legacy out here. I was at the very beginning of becoming very passionate about basketball. I was playing every day, training every day, studying the game, taking it very seriously, and I was at the very beginning of learning and becoming passionate about the game. And because the basketball is so great in this movie, and I saw it at the exact right time in my life, not only did it become my favorite basketball movie of all time, but because at that time, basketball was my life, it became my favorite film of all time. And I'm not sure if that's the way it still is today now that I'm removed from active competition, but at the time, I just thought it was the most amazing movie I'd ever seen. So no, I'm not objective about this movie, but I also don't think it's perfect, and we'll get into why in a minute. But let's start off by talking about why I love this movie so much. I was trying to think of how to explain the premise and plot of this movie to you guys, but I think the best and most effective way I could do it is to show you this.
Above the Rim tells the story of a high school basketball player who is torn between pursuing ball in college or the quick money of street ball.
First of all, let's address the cast, okay? The cast in this movie is really good. The acting itself is not that great, as I've talked about in the previous basketball movie reviews I've done, but again, in sports movies, you don't really require the acting to be great. You just kind of want the actors to fit the characters that they're playing naturally. The more they fit those characters, the less great acting there has to be. So the acting in this movie is not great, but most of the cast fits their characters really well. The best actor in this movie is probably played by Tanya Pinkins, who plays Kyle Watson's, Dwayne Martin's mom. She's probably the best actor in the movie, and that's evident when you see her acting in scenes with Dwayne Martin, because he is not a very good actor. He's pretty young in this movie, and I have never heard of him prior to seeing him in this movie. But again, it's okay because he plays the character so well. I can't imagine anyone else playing this role, and he just fits his character so well that I don't mind him not being a great actor. When it comes to Leon, I always felt like there was something off there about him playing that character. I don't know of another actor for that role that I would prefer to see, but I just feel like it's not exactly right. I do think that there must have been a better option for them to have in that character in terms of the acting. Not that the acting is bad, it just feels like something somehow is missing when it comes to the acting. But the question is, in terms of Leon, could they have found another good basketball player to play that role who could also act decently well? And I don't know that there was such a candidate. In terms of Marlon Wayans playing Boogaloo, the kind of funny sidekick and friend to Kyle Watson, this is one of the reasons I'm not objective about this movie, because Marlon Wayans is probably my favorite comedic actor. And that's not to say I think he's a great comedic actor, and certainly not the greatest comedic actor. He just happens to be my subjective favorite, because I think his comedic sensitivity and his sense of humor very much mirrors my own. So I relate to him. Because I relate to him, he's my favorite. One of the reasons he's my favorite is because whenever he's playing just a regular everyday guy and not some kind of wacky character like in White Chicks or anything like that, when he's just playing sort of like an everyday guy and he's still being funny and silly, one of the reasons he's my favorite is because you really feel like that's just sort of part of his personality. Like, that's who he is. He's funny, he's silly, he likes to make fun of situations, and he's not putting on an act. That's just who he is, like, in everyday life. That's how it comes across on screen when you see him, that he's just a funny, fun-loving guy. And because of that, whenever he displays any other kind of emotion besides being funny and silly, when he's angry or sad, you really feel like it's genuine coming from him, because it's such a contrast and a departure from his usual funny, silly character. When he's emotional, you really feel that, and it really comes across, and that's one of the reasons he's one of my favorite actors, and especially comedic actors. And then we have Tupac, another reason I'm not objective about this movie, because him being in this movie really puts it over the top for me, because he is my favorite rapper of all time. Again, in the same kind of vein where I don't think Marlon Wayans is the greatest comedic actor of all time, I also don't think Tupac is the greatest rapper, lyricist, writer of all time. It's just the whole package of Tupac, the personality and person, that I am such a hardcore fan of. And him being in this movie, it being his second movie, he plays this character so well, it fits him so well. He's not a great actor, but this role fits him so well, and he fits so well into it, that it just puts the movie over the top for me. And just a side note, the soundtrack for this movie is really good. I don't think it's great, but I think it fits, again, this movie the way it should, and it works for this movie, and it is really good. It's not great, but it really works for this movie. So let's talk about the main reason I love this movie so much, the basketball scenes in this movie. Now, as I'm talking about this stuff, try to keep in mind, I was young, I was at the very beginning of my basketball career. I was very passionate at that time because I was at the beginning. I was just learning, I was just starting to take it seriously. So the basketball in this movie is great. It's really done well. When you're watching it, you really feel like you're watching competent, competitive players play good, hard, competitive basketball, and I loved that. It's all up-tempo, it's all fast-paced, it's all sort of in your face and very intense, and I really did appreciate that, because it sort of makes you feel like what they're playing for really matters to them. Whether it's a high school game or it's out at the park, you really feel like, because of how much intensity they're bringing to the game, it really matters to them. And I love that, because it was like watching people who love the game play the game and sort of show the same emotion that I have about the game. And I really felt that at the time when I was first watching this movie as a teenager. Also, another side note, one of the other things I love about this movie, and it's just a small, tiny little scene, very insignificant in the overall scheme of the movie, is the one and only sort of workout scene when you see Kyle working out in his bedroom. I'm not going to go into depth about that here. I'm actually going to make it a whole separate main channel video about that, so make sure you guys look out for that. It was the first time I'd seen something like that. It really made an impact on me. It really sort of changed the way I approach the game, and that's another reason I love this movie. So now let's talk about some of the things that keep this movie from being a perfect movie. Number one is, like I said, the acting. The acting's not that great. Number two is, when it comes to the basketball scenes, this movie does fall into the same kind of trap that other basketball movies fall into, which is that when you see, especially scripted basketball highlights that are supposed to take place to show us why the players are such good players, a lot of those highlights take place when the player making the plays is open. And that's just sort of the way it works. Especially like with the jump shots, this movie tries to cover that up by having the defense show up late and like trying to contest and block the shot. But I think that's more so for the casual fan watching the movie. Those of us who are hardcore basketball enthusiasts understand that that jumper or layup or whatever it was is not really being contested just because the defense gets there late, and it's certainly not going to be in danger of being blocked either. So let's address probably the biggest issue that probably most people have with this movie, and that is the fouling. Because the fouling is crazy in this movie, at least in the final streetball tournament game, right? It's crazy over the top, and people probably really look at that and go, that's completely unrealistic, because there's a ton of it and it's super hard, just elbows flying all over the place. I mean, Mota in the movie on Birdie's team, he gets like 9 flagrant 2 fouls in the game, and none of them get called, and there's no free throws happening ever in the final game of the movie. And as a teenager, I kind of overlooked that and just sort of went, well, that's part of the game. Like, that's kind of part of how this basketball works in this basketball movie universe. You know, for this particular movie, that's just how it goes, and you just have to accept it. That's kind of the way I approached it when I was a teenager watching this movie. But now, being a few years removed from active competitive play and being able to sort of step back and take a look at it, what I realize now, and I think a lot of people may overlook when it comes to the crazy foul situation in the end of this movie, is that you have to take into context the character of Birdie, of Tupac, of the fact that he's the local gang leader. Everybody knows who he is, everybody knows what he is, everybody knows what he does. He's meant to be a feared character in this movie, and that being taken into account, the referees also know this as well. So they don't want to call fouls against Birdie's team because of who Birdie is and how dangerous and feared he is. They don't want to call fouls against his team, regardless of how flagrant they are. And I didn't really pay attention to that or realize that when I was a teenager watching this movie. But now, taking a step back, I realized, like, yeah, that's the reason why. Because of Birdie, because of Tupac, because they don't want to cross him. And yes, it's still over the top. Yes, it's still sensationalized, and it doesn't make a whole lot of sense. But I really do think it kind of fits the narrative, and because of that, it is forgivable for me. Another minor imperfection in the movie for me is something that it kind of bothered me, but I also kind of enjoyed at the same time, which is, unlike most other basketball movies, there's not a huge emphasis on how much time is left in the game and what the score is. You rarely see that in this movie. And in other basketball movies, they use that, the emphasis on how much time is left and what the score is to make you feel the urgency of the game. This movie doesn't do that, and it doesn't really have to, which is saying something good about this movie and the basketball played in this movie, because they're playing with such an intensity and such passion that you constantly feel a sense of urgency when they're playing, regardless of if it's the first quarter or the last quarter. We don't even really know, because they play with the same intensity and passion throughout the entire game. So how much time is left and what the score is doesn't nearly matter as much as it does in other basketball movies, because of the intensity and the intense action that's being displayed on the court. So it's a good thing that you don't see the time and score as much, but it is kind of distracting only because it's kind of a departure of what we're used to seeing in basketball movies. I think the only other thing I can say in terms of what sort of bothers me about this movie, and this is definitely kind of a nitpicky thing, but it's also kind of related to the score and time not being emphasized nearly as much in this movie as in other movies, is that in Above the Rim, you don't really know how much time is passing by. Like, you don't understand how much time passes between the beginning of the movie and the shootout tournament at the end of the game. You don't know if it's days or weeks or months. It's not really clear. And again, you're kind of more aware of that, and it's kind of like spoon-fed to you in other basketball movies, like how much time is passing by, because doing so establishes a sense of urgency again. But again, because of the pace of this movie and the basketball scenes in this movie, you don't need to specifically say, okay, this much time is passing by, because every basketball scene you see is played with such intensity that you just sort of constantly feel that urgency whenever basketball is taking place. So even though you don't need to specifically know how much time is passing by, it is kind of like a departure from what you're used to, and you kind of like are wondering how much time has passed. Other than those few minor issues, I really do think this is a great movie. One of the reasons it's so great is because it's balanced in terms of that it could have been a complete straight drama movie in terms of what the movie's about, the premise of the movie, the fact that Kyle Watson is trying to get into college at Georgetown, but yet there's the temptation of just sort of playing street ball and getting paid right now to do that. That could have been just a straight drama, but one of the reasons this movie is so great is because it's balanced out with positivity and comedy, and it feels good. It feels fun to watch because of that. And because of the balance, you do feel the emotions in this movie more than you probably would if it was just a straight drama or like a straight comedy, because after a while, if it's just straight comedy or it's just straight drama, you start to not care as much because you're desensitized to nothing but drama or nothing but comedy. And in movies like this where you have both and they're balanced out so well, because of that, you feel the drama. Because of that, you feel the comedy when they're present. A lot of the comedy is done by Marlon Wayans, of course, and that's one of the reasons it's such a fun movie, is because his interaction with other characters is so fun and entertaining. But it's not just him. I mean, the way the movie is written and scripted and the screenplay of the movie, you can just tell that it was a fun movie to make, and that's one of the reasons I love this movie as well, is because it's so rewatchable, because it is fun, while at the same time being able to present and give you the kind of dramatic feeling that it's going for as well. And so because of that, you can watch it over and over again and not really get tired of it. I guess let's ask the normal question. So, is Above the Rim a good movie? Yeah, I think it is. I mean, even trying to be objective and stepping back, I think because it has both drama and comedy and they balance each other out so well, it is a really good movie. But also when you throw in the basketball in there as well, the basketball scenes, because they're done so well, because play is so intense and so passionate and upbeat and up-tempo, when you feel constant urgency, when you put all that together, it's a good movie. Did Above the Rim accomplish what it was trying to do in terms of storytelling and getting the narrative across? Yeah, I really think it did. And it did it in a fun, entertaining way. Again, the directing is not amazing, the cinematography is not amazing, but it's all done certainly well enough to get all of the narrative across the way they intended to. And because of that, it is telling the story of Kyle Watson deciding how he's going to pursue the rest of his life in a fun, entertaining way, and I love it. Now here's the key question, which is, should you see it? I mean, I love it, but should you see it? Would you love it? Should you experience it? Yes. I think you should. I think it's a quintessential basketball movie. This is a basketball channel. This playlist is about basketball movies. If you're going to pursue watching basketball movies, this should definitely be one of them. You should not miss out on this movie. The basketball is great in it. The cast is great in it. The basketball story, the basketball narrative specifically itself is great. It also has something that I really enjoy and I'm a sucker for in movies, which is a comeback story. Leon playing Tommy Shepard in his kind of comeback story where like the guy he used to be the best, but now he's retired, but now he has to come back. I'm just kind of a sucker for that kind of storyline, and I just love that in this movie. And the fact that it's kind of done in a basketball sense, I love it, and I think it's great. And so, yes, definitely seek this movie out, try to find it, watch it. I don't see how you could not enjoy this movie. All that being said, I'm going to give Above the Rim an A-. It's not perfect, I don't claim that it is perfect, but for me, again, I'm not really objective. It was right place, right time for me. I love it. There's nothing really about the movie that I don't love. I mean, even Bernie Mac is in this movie playing a crazy character, and I don't know, I just love it. It's just great. So thank you guys for watching. I realize this was a super long review. I apologize for that, but none of the other reviews I can imagine will be as long as this one was, and I couldn't help myself in this review but to go into depth about how much I love this movie. So thank you guys again for watching. If you guys could subscribe to the channel, that'd be great. It would really help me out. If you liked this movie review, please give me a thumbs up. And hit that notification bell so that you're notified of the rest of the movies on this Esquire.com best basketball list. Also, so you're notified of when the video goes live of me addressing the small workout scene in this movie. That's going to be a main video on this channel in the coming days, probably next week. So again, thank you guys, and I will see you guys next time.
Here we go, turn it up, let's up.
Oh yeah, also check out the soundtrack. I think even if you're a teenager today in 2021, you should still check out the soundtrack and see if you like it. It's definitely 90s sounding, but I really do enjoy it. I really think you would too.